What if the most powerful person in your office isn't actually the CEO? You know, the one demanding results from the corner office.
Right.
What if it's the person who's willingly, like, pouring the coffee in the break room?
It's a completely different way to look at it.
It really is, because, I mean, we are totally conditioned to view power as this hierarchy. We picture this towering pyramid where all the wealth and the authority and the strength are just concentrated right at the very top.
Yeah. And the people at the bottom are just, well, the foundation.
Exactly. The ones doing the actual serving, the heavy lifting, the caretaking society views them as the weakest links, right? They're
Yeah.
just meant to bear the weight. But what if that entire mental model is just fundamentally backward?
It's a huge question.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We're tackling this really fascinating 2025 essay by an author named Zhu Feng. It's titled "Be a Servant, Never a Slave." And our mission today is to just completely dismantle your preconceived notions about power, leadership, and, well, service.
Yeah, it's definitely going to flip the script for a lot of people.
We're going to explore how true service is actually like a position of immense psychological strength, and why the person doing the serving is often the only one in the room with any real agency.
It is a radically counterintuitive piece of writing.
Yeah.
Really makes you rethink things. But before we get into the actual mechanics of his argument, I should probably provide a brief piece of context here.
Oh, right, yeah, the theological stuff.
Exactly. So throughout this essay, the author leans on some very specific theological references to illustrate his points. He routinely brings up Christ Jesus and the greatest creator as these sort of archetypes.
Right.
So I just want to be entirely clear right at the outset that we are not here to endorse or promote or debate any specific religious theology today.
Absolutely not.
We're just examining these references purely as philosophical tools. The author is, using these historical and theological figures to map out this highly complex framework regarding human psychology.
Yeah, like personal boundaries and interpersonal dynamics.
Right. We are analyzing the text completely impartially,
Right.
just to extract the structural logic behind his arguments.
And, I mean, the logic is just fascinating. The ultimate conclusion we're building toward today, and this is wild, is the idea that to be a true servant, you have to possess the psychological fortitude to basically look someone in the eye and say, "To hell with it, I quit."
It's quite the punchline.
Right. But to understand how we actually get to that ultimate flex of power, we have to start exactly where the author starts, which is by separating two words that society has just honestly lazily blurred together for centuries.
Servant and slave.
Yes. We throw those terms around almost interchangeably, when describing someone at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. But Schweffing draws this massive impenetrable wall between them.
He does. He treats them as complete psychological opposites.
Oh,
And the distinction relies entirely on the internal state of the individual.
not the actual job they're doing.
Exactly, not the external action they're performing at all.
Hmm.
In his framework, a servant is a voluntary, willing helper. They actively choose to serve. And because that choice is autonomous, they retain absolute dignity.
Wow, okay.
And a slave.
Well, slave, conversely, is the product of oppression by some external dominant force. A slave is compelled into labor, they suffer hardship under that coercion, and ultimately, they lose their dignity in the act of submission.
Okay, I want to unpack this because it sounds a bit neat and tidy on paper, right?
Yeah.
Let's stress test that boundary.
Sure.
Let's look at modern economic reality. Suppose you have someone working, like a mid-level corporate job. They totally despise the work. They have a toxic manager.
They've got bills.
Right. They have a mortgage, student loans, a family to feed. So they show up every single day and do their tasks strictly because they feel financially trapped. Does this framework suggest that person is effectively operating with a slave mindset? Just because they feel they lack the freedom to leave? Under Schweffing's strict definitions,
Yeah.
it really comes down to the concept of the internal locus of control.
The internal locus of control, right?
Right. When humans feel that their actions are entirely dictated by external pressures, so whether that's a literal tyrant or just the crushing weight of modern debt, they experience a profound loss of agency.
Because they don't feel like they're choosing it.
Exactly. The labor is coerced by circumstance. They're trading their time and energy purely out of fear of the consequences of stopping.
Wow.
And that psychological state where you feel you have no choice and you're submitting to a dominant force that completely aligns with his definition of slavery.
That's intense.
It is. The mechanism at play here is cognitive dissonance, really. Your actions do not align with your internal desires, and that friction is what strips away your dignity.
But wait, if choice is the only thing that separates the two, what happens if that exact same person shifts their internal narrative?
What do you mean?
Let's say they acknowledge the toxic boss and the annoying commute, but they consciously reframe the situation. They say to themselves, I am choosing to endure this environment because providing financial stability for my family is my highest priority right now. No one is making me do this. I am actively choosing this trade-off.
Ah.
The external reality hasn't changed one bit, right? They're still sitting in the exact same cubicle. But does that mental shift transform them from a slave into a servant?
It fundamentally rewires the dynamic. Completely. By reclaiming the narrative of choice, the locus of control moves from the external world back into the individual's own mind.
So they aren't submitting anymore.
Right. They are no longer submitting to the toxic boss. They are voluntarily serving their family's well-being. The job is merely the instrument of that service.
Oh, wow, that makes so much sense.
And because of that, the resentment begins to dissipate because the action is now aligned with a self-determined goal. The dignity is preserved.
That's a huge shift.
It really is. You could have two people performing the exact same tedious task right next to each other, but the one who views it as a coerced obligation is psychologically degrading, while the one who views it as a voluntary contribution is psychologically intact.
That makes the barrier between the two concepts almost entirely psychological, which leads to the author's next major leap. And honestly, this is the part of the essay that might rub people the wrong way.
Yeah, it's definitely provocative.
He takes this idea of choice and argues that the ability to make that choice, the actual capacity to be a servant, is a privilege. And he claims it's a privilege reserved exclusively for the noble and the strong.
Yes.
He literally writes that the pitiful and the weak do not even possess the qualification to be servants.
It is a jarring statement.
Yeah.
Especially since modern culture tends to equate servitude with weakness and vulnerability.
Yeah.
We think of the servant as the lowest rung.
Right, exactly.
But we have to look at the physics of human energy, as Xu describes it.
Yeah.
To serve someone else requires an output of energy, whether that's physical labor, emotional bandwidth, or, intellectual focus.
Drains your battery.
Right. And if you are weak, and he uses the stark examples of patients in hospital beds or the elderly in nursing homes, you do not have an excess of energy to give. In fact, your survival depends on taking energy in. You require servants.
Okay, so true service can only flow from a position of surplus.
Exactly.
But I mean, if I get hit by a car tomorrow and I'm lying in an ICU bed, do I just suddenly lose my status as a servant? That feels a bit, I don't know, devoid of empathy.
Is he making a moral judgment about weakness here?
No, it isn't a moral judgment at all. It's really just an observation of systemic capacity. Think of it less like a hierarchy of human worth and more like a closed-loop electrical system.
Okay, an electrical system.
You cannot jumpstart a car using a dead battery. It doesn't matter how noble or willing that dead battery is, right? It simply lacks the charge.
Oh, I see. The car that provides the jumpstart, the servant in this scenario, has to possess a surplus of power to bleed off into the other vehicle.
That's a great analogy.
So when a person is deeply ill or deeply traumatized or entirely consumed by their own survival, their battery is in the red. They are structurally incapable of serving others until their own reserves are replenished. Service, therefore, is the ultimate indicator that your own needs are met and exceeded.
That flips the script entirely because, if you're the one running around taking care of everybody else, society might look at you and think, oh, they're at the bottom of the pecking order.
Right.
But according to this logic, you are actually the most powerful person in the room because you're the only one with a fully charged battery. The people making all the demands, the ones constantly requiring attention and care, they're actually the ones operating from a deficit.
Precisely.
Yeah.
We often confuse the consumption of resources with power. A tyrant demands that everyone around them cater to their needs, soothe their ego, execute their whims. But that constant need for external validation and labor is a symptom of internal weakness. A true servant doesn't need to extract energy from the room. They bring energy into it.
Which brings us to how this looks at the absolute highest levels of authority. If serving is the ultimate flex of strength, what does peak leadership look like?
And this is where Xu turns to the natural world to illustrate his point.
Right, and here is where those theological metaphors come back into play, because when humans try to picture the ultimate authority, like a supreme being, We almost universally project our own human insecurities onto it.
Oh, absolutely.
We imagine a cosmic king sitting on a throne demanding absolute obedience and tribute.
But the author suggests we observe how the natural world actually operates. He describes the greatest creator not as a tyrant, but as a groundskeeper.
A groundskeeper. I love that image.
Yeah, he points to the grass, the wildflowers, the trees, the insects, the birds. The ultimate power in his framework expresses itself by sending down gentle drizzles and life-giving dew to nourish these fragile, smaller lives.
So the power isn't demonstrated by extracting worship.
No, it's demonstrated by providing the baseline conditions for weaker things to thrive.
And he also scales this down to the human level, which is really interesting. He talks about a shepherd. The shepherd is vastly more powerful than the sheep, obviously.
Right.
But the shepherd's entire day is structured around serving the flock, finding them safe pasture, securing fresh water, protecting them from predators.
Or consider an even more mundane example he uses: the person who feeds their chickens, pigs, or dogs. The human possesses total control over the animal's environment, yet they act as the servant to those smaller lives.
Yeah.
From these natural observations, he establishes a profound definition of leadership. True leadership is fundamentally the act of the strong serving the weak. It is biological and systemic stewardship.
Okay, hold on. I need to push back on this a little bit because the practical reality feels a lot less profound.
Okay, let's hear it.
If I'm waking up at like 6 in the morning in the freezing rain to let my golden retriever out, and then I'm bending over with a little plastic bag to pick up its poop, I do not feel like a majestic leader of the natural world. I mean, I feel like I work for the dog.
Yeah, I get that.
How does Westming reconcile this mundane, almost degrading level of service with actual practical authority?
Because you are confusing positional authority with functional authority.
Positional versus functional. Okay, break that down.
Positional authority is the illusion that because you hold a title, or in the case of the dog, because you hold the leash and bought the house, you should be exempt from discomfort.
Right.
Functional authority recognizes that the health of the entire ecosystem relies on your surplus strength. The dog cannot navigate modern urban plumbing, right?
Right.
You can. You are picking up the waste because you possess the systemic awareness and capability to maintain a hygienic environment. You are taking on the burden to preserve the system.
Oh, wow. So a true leader is essentially the shock absorber.
Exactly. Let's translate that away from pet care and back into the workplace. A positional leader sits at the apex of the pyramid and demands that all the profit, credit, and energy flow upward to them. They extract.
Right.
A functional leader acts as the foundation of the building. They sit at the bottom, absorbing the pressure, removing roadblocks, securing budgets, and taking the blame, all so the people above them can simply do their jobs.
The foundation serves the structure.
Yes, if the foundation demands that the roof cater to it, the whole building collapses.
That makes total sense. But this brings up a massive red flag for me.
What's that?
If your entire philosophy is built around being the foundation, around giving your excess energy to weaker lives and removing roadblocks for everyone else, how do you prevent yourself from becoming a complete doormat? I mean, if you're constantly willing to serve, human nature dictates that people will eventually take advantage of you. You will be drained dry. So how does a servant stop themselves from sliding right back into the role of a subjugated slave?
That is the most precarious edge of this entire philosophy. And the author establishes incredibly rigid boundaries to prevent exactly that.
Okay, what are the boundaries?
A true servant does not possess a savior complex, and they do not serve blindly. Suefeng explicitly states that a servant serves only truth, kindness, beauty, love, faith, and sincerity. They serve principles, not egos.
So, like, if a manager asks you to execute a project that legitimately helps the team, you serve.
Right.
But if that same manager asks you to fudge the numbers on a quarterly report to make themselves look better, you refuse.
Exactly, because at that point, you are no longer serving truth or the health of the ecosystem. You are serving deceit and a fragile ego. The author is adamant that a true servant absolutely never serves falsehood, wickedness, hatred, or authority purely for the sake of authority.
Oh.
If an individual submits to a stronger power simply because it is powerful, they have instantly forfeited their status as a servant and become a slave.
That distinction is critical. Because a slave submits to a person or a title because they fear the consequences, right?
Right.
But a servant submits only to shared principles. They'll serve a shared goal, but they will not grovel.
He writes that only those who treat others as equals can truly be servants. If you find yourself flattering a boss, bowing and scraping or currying favor to get a promotion, you are engaging in a transactional manipulation, not
It's
service.
transactional, yeah.
True service is a willing gift of excess strength. The moment it becomes a tool for appeasement, it degrades the individual.
Which perfectly sets up what might be the most powerful and honestly the most entertaining quote in the entire essay.
Oh, I know the one.
It's the ultimate failsafe against becoming a doormat. Shufeng writes, I am willing to be your servant, but if you fail to show me respect, pick apart every detail, boss others around, and remain ungrateful, well, to hell with it. I quit.
It's the most crucial mechanism in his entire framework.
It changes everything, because it proves that the defining characteristic of the servant isn't the act of sweeping the floor or balancing the spreadsheet or doing the heavy lifting. The defining characteristic is the absolute, unalienable freedom to walk away.
It is the psychological shield that protects the servant's dignity. To hell with it, I quit.
Yeah.
Establishes that the service was always a voluntary grace, never a mandatory toll.
Right.
If the recipient of the service becomes tyrannical, ungrateful, or demands submission rather than cooperation, the servant simply packs up their surplus energy and leaves. And what happens when the strong person leaves?
The weak person is stuck.
Exactly. The tyrant who actually relied on that extracted energy is left to collapse under the weight of their own incompetence.
The power to walk away is the ultimate leverage. But let's ground this in reality again for a second, because quitting isn't always practically easy. You can't always just walk out of a job or abandon a difficult family member the moment they act ungrateful.
No, of course not. You might not execute the action of walking away immediately, but you must maintain the psychological readiness to do so.
It's an internal state.
Exactly. It is the internal knowledge that you could survive without this dynamic, that you have a line in the sand. If you truly believe you cannot survive without the toxic dynamic, you are a slave to it.
Right.
But if you know you could walk away, but you choose to stay temporarily to maneuver a better exit, or maybe because you're serving a higher principle of familial duty despite the ingratitude, you remain a servant. The power lies in knowing you hold the keys to your own energetic reserves.
This whole analysis completely guts the traditional power pyramid. We started off picturing the people at the bottom as the victims, right? The weak ones being crushed by the weight of the strong at the top.
Yep.
But Suefeng's essay takes that entire model, turns it upside down, and shakes it out. He rebuilds the concept of servitude as a state of supreme psychological strength, immense self-respect, and conscious agency.
And crucially, by carving out the specific definition of a servant, he ensures that the concept of a slave is stripped of any romanticism.
Oh, that's a good point.
Sometimes society tries to romanticize suffering or forced labor as inherently noble. The author refuses to do that. He clarifies that slavery is a tragic, degrading loss of dignity caused by oppression. True nobility belongs exclusively to those who have the strength to give and the freedom to choose when to stop giving.
It is a profound paradigm shift. If you are serving because your battery is full and you are actively choosing to sustain the ecosystem around you, you are a leader.
Yes.
But if you are demanding service from everyone else because you cannot sustain yourself, you aren't powerful. You are merely loud and pitiful.
It forces a ruthless reevaluation of where we derive our sense of self-worth. Do we feel powerful because we can force people to do things for us? Or do we feel powerful because we are capable of doing things for others?
That is exactly the question I want you to carry with you today. Think about the most exhausting, thankless obligations in your life right now. Maybe it's a chaotic project at work that is dragging on. Maybe it's managing the emotional toll of a difficult relative, or, maybe it's a community commitment that has just ballooned out of control.
We all have them.
Right now, you probably view those tasks through the lens of a burden. You might feel trapped by them, drained by them, even a little resentful. But what if you mentally reframed the underlying mechanics of those obligations tomorrow?
It changes everything.
What if you look at them not as heavyweights forced onto you by an uncaring world, but as complex systemic problems that only you currently have the psychological surplus to handle? If you walked into that stressful environment tomorrow, deeply aware that you hold the ultimate nuclear option, that you have the power to say, to hell with it, I quit, but you choose to stay simply because you are strong enough to serve truth and kindness for one more day, would those tasks still drain you? Or would you suddenly realize that you are, in fact, the most powerful person in the room?
It entirely changes the definition of what it means to be in charge.
It really does. Keep that in mind the next time you feel buried at the bottom of the pyramid. You might just be the foundation, keeping the whole thing standing. Until next time, keep digging deep.